My name is Rachel Coleman. I am 30 years old. And for 20 years of my life, I believed I was adopted. Not because anyone ever showed me papers. Not because anyone ever explained it kindly. I believed it because my stepmother told me so, over and over, starting when I was 10 years old, in a voice that never once softened. You know you're not really part of this family, right? You were adopted. That's just how it is. I want you to sit with that sentence for a moment, because everything that follows in this story traces back to it. If you're new here, welcome. I tell true stories about families, hidden truths, and the kind of justice that sometimes takes decades to arrive. If this story moves you, consider subscribing. It helps this channel keep telling stories like mine. Now, let me take you back to where it started. My mother died when I was 7. Cancer, fast and merciless, the kind that doesn't give a family time to prepare. My father, David, remarried 2 years later, to a woman named Patricia. I was 9 when they married. I wanted, desperately, for it to work. I wanted a mother again, even a new one, even an imperfect one. Patricia had a daughter from a previous relationship, Vanessa, 1 year younger than me. From the very first week they moved in, it was clear that Patricia had 2 categories of children in her mind, her daughter, and me. I don't think my father ever fully saw it. Or maybe he saw it and told himself it was temporary, that it would smooth out with time. It never smoothed out. It calcified. Patricia started the adoption story when I was 10. I remember the exact afternoon. I had asked her, innocently, why Vanessa got a new backpack for school and I didn't. Patricia knelt down to my eye level, and with a strange, cold calm, she said, "Rachel, you need to understand something about this family. You're not really part of it the way Vanessa is. You were adopted in. That's different." I was 10. I didn't know how to argue with an adult who said something so confidently. I believed her completely. From that day forward, "you were adopted in" became her explanation for everything. Why my clothes were hand-me-downs while Vanessa's were new. Why Vanessa got dance lessons and I got told we couldn't afford 2 sets of lessons. Why my report cards went unmentioned while Vanessa's went on the refrigerator with magnets shaped like stars. I never told my father what Patricia said. Somewhere in my 10-year-old mind, I had decided that if I said it out loud, it would become more real, more permanent. So I carried it silently, the way children carry the things adults hand them without asking if they're heavy enough to bear. By the time I was 12, the story had a full shape in my head. I imagined a birth mother somewhere who had given me up. I imagined my father, out of kindness or obligation, taking me in after my real mother had died. I never questioned the logic that my mother, the woman who had raised me for 7 years, whose face I still remembered clearly, whose voice I could still sometimes hear in my dreams, wasn't actually my birth mother at all. Grief makes children believe strange things, especially when the adults around them offer no correction. If you've ever been a child handed a story about yourself that reshaped how you saw your whole life, I understand exactly how disorienting that is. Let's continue. Patricia's cruelty was never loud. She was not a woman who screamed or threw things. She was precise, controlled, and endlessly patient in her coldness. At family dinners, she would ask Vanessa detailed questions about her day, her friends, her homework, leaning in with real interest. When I spoke, she would nod, once, and turn back to her plate. My father worked long hours as a regional sales manager, often traveling 3 or 4 days a week. In his absence, Patricia ran the household, and in that household, I learned quickly that my comfort was not a priority. I remember my 13th birthday clearly. Patricia had ordered a large custom cake for Vanessa's birthday 2 months earlier, a 3-tier cake shaped like a castle, with edible glitter and her name in gold icing. For mine, she handed me a $20 bill and said, "Pick something up yourself. I have a lot going on this week." I bought myself a small grocery store cupcake and ate it alone in my room. My father was traveling that week. He called that evening, sang happy birthday over the phone, and had no idea what the day had actually looked like on the ground. I never told him. That became the pattern of my entire adolescence, absorbing the difference in treatment silently, protecting my father from a truth I assumed would only cause conflict, assuming, somewhere deep down, that maybe Patricia was right. Maybe I really didn't belong the way Vanessa did. School became my refuge, the same way it becomes a refuge for a lot of kids in situations like mine. I threw myself into academics, not because anyone pushed me to, but because grades were the one area of my life where effort produced a fair result. Nobody could take a good grade away from me and give it to Vanessa instead. Vanessa, for her part, was never outright cruel to me. I want to be fair here, the way I've learned to be fair in hindsight. She was a kid absorbing the environment her mother built. She got the better treatment, and like most kids, she accepted it without questioning why her stepsister wasn't getting the same. I didn't blame her for that. I blamed the adult who built the system. When I was 16, I finally worked up the courage to ask Patricia directly. I chose a quiet moment, no witnesses, hoping for something resembling honesty. Patricia, can I ask you something? About the adoption. Do you know anything about my birth parents? Is there any way I could find out? She looked at me for a long moment, and something flickered across her face that I didn't understand at the time, something closer to alarm than sadness. Then she said, flatly, "That's not something we discuss, Rachel. Your father handled all of that a long time ago. Digging it up would only hurt him. Let it go." I let it go. Because I trusted her word more than I trusted my own instincts, the way children raised in imbalance often do. I had spent 6 years by then absorbing her version of my own history. It didn't occur to me, not seriously, that the story might be a lie. If you're watching this and you've ever accepted a painful story about yourself simply because an adult said it with enough confidence, I want you to know, that's not a flaw in you. That's what children do. They trust the people who are supposed to protect them, even when those people don't deserve it. I left for college at 18, on a full academic scholarship I earned entirely through my own effort. My father drove me to campus himself, an unusual gesture, since Patricia typically managed the family's schedule. I remember him hugging me tightly in the parking lot and saying, "I know things have been hard at home. I see more than you think I do." I didn't know, at the time, exactly what he meant. I would understand it much more clearly, years later. College gave me distance, and distance gave me clarity. Away from Patricia's quiet, constant recalibration of my worth, I began to notice how much of what I believed about myself had never actually been mine. It had been handed to me, piece by piece, by a woman who had every reason to want me to believe it. I studied biology, then went on to nursing school, driven by something I couldn't fully name at the time but understand now, a desire to take care of people the way I had once needed to be taken care of and wasn't. I built a career. I built a life. I got married in my late 20s, to a kind, steady man named Mark, who, in our early years together, gently encouraged me to look into my adoption records, something I had always been too afraid to pursue. "If it's true," he said, "don't you want to know your history? And if it's not true, don't you want to know that too?" It took me another year to work up the courage. When I finally did, what I found didn't just surprise me. It rewrote everything I thought I understood about my entire childhood. I contacted the county records office where I was born, requesting my original birth certificate. It took several weeks of paperwork, phone calls, and one uncomfortable conversation with my father, whom I finally told, at 30 years old, what Patricia had said to me all those years ago. My father's face, when I told him, went pale in a way I had never seen before. "She told you that? Rachel, you were never adopted. Your mother, your birth mother, is the woman who raised you until she passed. I don't understand where Patricia would even get that idea." I sat across from him, feeling the ground tilt slightly beneath me, the same way it must have felt for anyone whose entire understood history turns out to be false. "She said it constantly, Dad. For years. I believed her completely. My father was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed the entire direction of this story. Rachel, there was an adoption in this family. But it wasn't you. He explained, slowly, carefully, that Vanessa, Patricia's own daughter, had actually been adopted by Patricia as an infant, years before Patricia and my father ever met. Patricia had never been able to have biological children of her own. Vanessa was not Patricia's biological daughter at all. She had been adopted through a private agency when Vanessa was only a few weeks old. I sat there, stunned, turning this new information over in my mind. For 20 years, Patricia had told me I was the adopted one, the outsider, the one who didn't really belong, when the truth was the exact reverse. It wasn't me who had been brought into this family from somewhere else. It was Vanessa, her own daughter, the one she had favored, protected, and elevated above me at every single turn. My father explained that Patricia had never told Vanessa the truth about her own adoption, terrified that Vanessa would somehow feel less like her real daughter if she knew. Instead of confronting her own insecurity honestly, Patricia had, consciously or not, redirected the entire narrative onto me, the stepdaughter who was already vulnerable, already grieving, already unlikely to push back. It was easier, apparently, to make me the outsider than to risk Vanessa ever seeing herself as anything other than fully, completely Patricia's. I want to pause here and say something important. I'm not a psychologist, and I can't tell you with certainty what was happening inside Patricia's mind all those years. But what my father described sounds like a woman deeply insecure about her own daughter's origins, so afraid of that insecurity being exposed that she buried it by projecting the entire weight of not belonging onto a different child entirely, a child who had even less power to question it than her own daughter would have. It didn't make what she did to me okay. Understanding where cruelty comes from is never the same as excusing it. A 16-year-old girl doesn't need her stepmother's insecurities weaponized against her. But it did, finally, give me an answer to a question I had silently carried for 20 years, why me? Why did she choose me to carry that story? Because I was the one least likely to ever find out the truth. If you're watching this and something in your own life has ever made more sense once you learned what the person hurting you was actually afraid of, take a moment and like this video. It genuinely helps stories like this reach someone else who needs to hear it. I confronted Patricia 3 weeks later, at a small family lunch my father had arranged, though he hadn't told her exactly why. I brought the copy of my birth certificate with me, though I never even needed to take it out of my bag. Patricia, I said, keeping my voice level, the way I had learned to over years of therapy I'd finally started after my father's revelation, I know about Vanessa's adoption. I know I was never the one who was adopted. You told me that for 20 years, and it wasn't true. The color drained from Patricia's face in real time. For the first time in my entire relationship with her, I watched her search for words and find none immediately. I don't know why I said that, she finally managed, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. I think I was scared. I was scared Vanessa would find out and feel different. I thought if the story existed about someone else in the house, nobody would ever look at her and question it. So you made me the outsider, I said, so your daughter never had to feel like one. For 20 years. She didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one that would have made it acceptable, and I think, on some level, she knew that too. Vanessa, who was present at that lunch, sat in stunned silence, learning in that same moment both that she had been adopted and that her mother had spent 2 decades letting her stepsister carry the weight of a lie meant to protect that secret. Vanessa, to her credit, turned to me afterward, visibly shaken, and said quietly, I had no idea. Any of it. I'm so sorry, Rachel. It wasn't Vanessa's fault, and I told her so. She had been a child receiving whatever story her mother constructed, the same as I had been. The difference was that her story protected her, and mine had been built specifically to protect her at my expense. I didn't get a dramatic, tearful reconciliation with Patricia that day, and I'm not going to pretend I did. Some relationships don't fully repair, no matter how much clarity finally arrives. What I did get, for the first time in 20 years, was the truth, spoken plainly, at a table, in front of the people who needed to hear it. My relationship with Patricia today is distant, careful, mostly formal. My relationship with Vanessa, oddly enough, has grown closer since that lunch, built now on an honesty that never existed between us as kids. My father and I are closer too. He still carries guilt for not seeing sooner what was happening under his own roof, and I've told him, more than once, that he doesn't need to carry that forever. None of us can undo the years that already happened. We can only decide, honestly, what to build going forward. I know now that I was never the one who didn't belong. I was a grieving child who was handed someone else's insecurity and told to carry it as if it were my own history. What happened to me wasn't about who I was. It was about what Patricia was too afraid to face about her own family. If you've ever spent years believing a story about yourself that someone else invented to protect their own fear, I want you to hear this clearly. The story they told you was never proof of your worth. It was proof of what they couldn't face in themselves. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to find the truth, even decades later. And you are allowed, finally, to put down a weight that was never yours to carry in the first place. Thank you for watching this story all the way through. If it meant something to you, subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments if you've ever discovered a truth that completely rewrote what you believed about your own family. Stories like Rachel's matter, and sharing them helps them reach someone who might need to hear this today. I'll see you in the next story.